Hey, what is going on guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the tier list for top lane for patch 7.6. Now, one thing to note before we get started here is I'm not going to be rating Galio for this patch. The main reason is because he just got released and it usually does take a good patch or two before people really understand how strong the champion is and where he will actually slot into the tier list. So don't comment down below asking like where is Galio because he's not going to be included in this tier list. But with that being said guys, let's get started. So starting it off in the tier 1 for this patch is going to be Renekton. Now Renekton, he's gotten a lot stronger these past few patches and it's for a few different reasons. So number 1, items like Blade of the Ruined King and Black Cleaver did get buffed in recent patches, and Renekton is a really good user of both of those two items, so that indirectly does make Renekton stronger. And then also the changes to Fervor also help him out quite a bit because Renekton is a great Fervor using champion. It's very easy for him to get those stacks off, so because of those like 3 buffs to different items and masteries, Renekton is a really good pick in patch 7.6. He's a great lane bully champion. He really doesn't have too many hard matchups in the laning phase. You can definitely snowball the early game super hard with Renekton, and your early game is probably one of the best for any top laner, so definitely look to take advantage of that, look to get a snowball going, and you can just take over a game with this champion. And then as for when and when you should not pick Renekton in this patch, he generally does do not too well against these ranged top lane picks. So for example, Teemo and Quinn, those kind of cheese picks can do pretty good against Renekton because they do have the range advantage and they do have the blinds in their kit. So it is harder for Renekton to beat them in the laning phase. But other than that, he does do really well against a lot of the meta picks and against a lot of the melee top laners. Riven and Yasuo are 2 of the most picked top lane champions, and Renekton can do a really good job against them. So next up in the tier 1 here is going to be Fiora, and Fiora right now is a lot stronger for similar reasons that Renekton has gotten stronger recently. So the Black Cleaver changes as well as the Fervor changes are really good for Fiora because she is a dueling top lane champion. She's one of the best dueling top laners, so she's going to be able to get those Fervor stacks very easily when she is in her duel, and it's just going to allow her to deal so much more damage. She's probably one of the most snowbally top lane champions. Her split push is super good, and you're always gonna have to send at least 2 or 3 people to get Fiora or to kill her if she does get ahead in the laning phase, because her dueling potential and her 1v2 potential if ahead is super good because of her ultimate. If she gets her ultimate proc and she gets that healing off, then you're really not gonna kill Fiora. And I've just seen so many good Fioras just take over games with their split push, and they can basically like 1v5 due to the fact that she does have great mobility and she also does have that insane healing from her ultimate. And then as for when and when you should not pick Fiora in this patch, she does struggle against champions like Pantheon and Talon. Pantheon is one of her hardest counters, so I would not pick her into that matchup unless you're insanely confident on your Fiora. She does do really well against a lot of matchups that either do have skill shots or they do have an ability that is very easy for Fiora to W. So for example, she does great against champions like Alawi or Gnar or Echo because they all have skill shots, and if the Fiora is a good Fiora player, then she should be able to outplay those matchups really easily in the laning phase. So next up in the tier 1 here for top lane is going to be Clen, and Clen right now in the top lane, I think he's still super underrated. His pick rate is still really low, but I think he's one of the best top lane champions that you can play in this patch. He's started to see a lot more play in the competitive scene now. People have started to pick him up and realize that Clen is actually a really good pick in the top lane. So I think that the main reasons to why Clen is a great top laner is because number 1, his ability to set up ganks for his jungler is some of the best for any top laner. If he does end up landing his Q on the opponent, he's gonna be able to pull them into him, and if his jungler is like walking up the river, it's just super easy for Clen to engage on them, use his Q, and you're gonna at least burn a flash every single time, if not pick up a very free kill. Now Clen's roaming potential is also some of the best for any top laner, so once you do at level 6 as Clen, look to roam mid or look to roam bot lane, because just by getting that one good roam off with your ultimate, it could end up winning your team the game. And then like Renekton and Fiora, Clen did benefit quite a bit from the Black Cleaver changes and from the Fervor changes, which is making him a lot stronger now in this patch. And then for when and when you should not pick Clen in this patch, the only champion that I would say that hard counters Clen or that can do a really good job against him is Fiora. Now the main reason for this is because if Clen does try to engage on Fiora with his Q, when his Q is about to pull Fiora in, she can W and she can just turn that around super easily. She can end up stunning the Clen and just get a load of free damage off on him. So when you are playing that matchup as the Clen, it's just very hard for you to engage on Fiora, especially when her W is up. Other than that though, I wouldn't say there's any matchups that you should try to avoid heavily because I think Clen is just a great pick right now in the top lane. And then the final champion in the tier 1 for this patch is going to be Jayce, and Jayce has stayed in the tier 1 for top lane for countless patches now. He's still a really good pick in the top lane. It doesn't look like he's going to be even getting nerfs in these next few patches, so if you're a good Jayce player, I would just continue to keep playing him. He's a great lane bully top lane champion. He really doesn't have any hard counters in the laning phase, so you're just pretty free to just do whatever you want in lane as Jayce. If you are up against a melee top lane champion, it's very easy for you to bully them out in the laning phase. It's very easy for you to just poke them down to low HP. If they do come in for CS, you could just turn on them with an all-in, and if you do end up getting ahead in lane as Jayce, your zoning potential is insanely good, your tower pushing potential and your ability to get that first blood tower is the best for any top laner, I would have to say, because of your W with Jayce. So he's just still a great top lane pick, and I would look to pick him up if he is not banned. And then as for when and when you should not pick Jayce, statistically here, it does look like these tankier top lane champions do a pretty good job against him. I think the reason for this though is because once it does reach the 35 to 40 minute point, those tankier champions will be more useful than Jayce, and an inexperienced Jayce player, they probably won't take advantage of his strong early game and just try to bully out those melee top lane champions. So if you are going to play Jayce in the top lane, you can't really just sit back in lane and just farm up because those other champions will outscale you. You do have to go aggressive with them in the laning phase. You do have to take advantage of your strong early game to be successful on the champion. Now, if we take a look at the tier 1.5 champions for this patch, these champions all do have the potential to be in the tier 1. The reason to why they're tier 1.5 though is because a lot of these champions, they're not champions that you're going to want to blind pick and just pick in every scenario. A lot of them do have quite a few counters in the laning phase, so you're not going to want to pick them every single game. But if you do know how to play one of these champions correctly and you can find the right matchup, then they're very good carry top laners for this patch. So these champions, they're going to be Rumble, Camille, Darius, Gragas, Pantheon, Swain, and Nautilus. So for Rumble right now, I think he's a great pick if you are lacking AP damage. He does have quite a few counters in the top lane though. The champions in the tier 1 can all do a really good job against Rumble because they can just buy an early Maw against him, and it's very hard for him to deal with that, and it's very hard for him to just out trade them and win duels against them in the laning phase. But he's one of the best teamfight top lane champions, so if you are lacking teamfight or you're lacking AP damage, then he's a great top lane pick. Now for Gragas and Nautilus, they are the two best tanks in the top lane for this patch. If you're lacking a tank on your team, then I would definitely choose one of those two champions. If you're newer to top lane and you're not super mechanically skilled, then I would choose Nautilus over Gragas, but I would say that Gragas is actually better than Nautilus if you have good knowledge on both of the champions. If you can play both champions really well and you know how to combo with both of the champions, then I would choose Gragas over Nautilus in this patch. Now for the tier 2 champions in this patch, these champions are pretty much any champion that is viable in this patch and that does have potential. They're not like super strong though, and they're not tier 1 or tier 1.5 quality. If you can play any of these champions well, they can be good carry top lane champions, but I wouldn't say that they're like super strong or anything in this patch. So I will just put all of these champions up on screen here. I'm not going to go into detail about any of them because there are quite a few champions in the tier 2. So that is going to be all for this video, guys. If I didn't mention a certain champion on this list anywhere, it basically means that they're really not worth picking over a champion that is in the tier 1 or in the tier 1.5 or tier 2. So for example, a champion like Gragas and Nautilus, those are really the only two best top lane tank picks in this patch. There's really no reason why you should pick a different tank champion because those champions really aren't banned very often at all, so you will be able to get them pretty much every single game. And champions like Maokai, he's just been nerfed too much recently. Gragas and Nautilus are just much better versions of Maokai, which is why he isn't on the list. But with that being said, guys, thanks for watching, have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.